So my name is WANGARI Grace. I am a storyteller based in Nairobi, and I'm also a children's author.
My name is Sven Kacirek. I'm a musician from Hamburg, Germany. And I met WANGARI for the first ever time in March 2020. So we met for coffee and we spoke about this idea to work on a musical storytelling performance about colonialism for children.
Death by starvation in German colonies was not just limited to Tanzania.
A lot of things have been written, a lot has been said about colonialism, but even our curriculum books, really the focus, the perspective has always been from an outside eye.
Girl, her name was Jahohora. At only 11 years old, she was hiding somewhere in the deserted areas of central Namibia.
It has really been an eye-opener and a bigger challenge than I thought it would be.
Johannesburg, 1932.
The next day, after our first meeting, I traveled back to Germany, and then 3 days later, almost the entire world went into lockdown.
So over the early months of the pandemic, we worked a lot online, doing research, reading, having online meetings on Zoom, trying to brainstorm exactly what we would want to do.
Different families, between different communities. And that suspicion, that hate, can be felt to this very day.
At a certain point, we started the process of writing the stories. Then WANGARI, for instance, wrote a chapter about Miriam Makeba and her fight against the apartheid regime in South Africa, while I wrote another draft about Leopold II and his Congo Free State. And then she wrote a chapter about the impact of colonialism, while I wrote another chapter about those racist experiments by the Anthropologie Française in Paris. And twice a week we read those drafts to one another, and we had long discussions about what to add and what to change. And this was really productive, but also very inspiring.
So of course, when colonialism is discussed in many African countries, we mostly hear about the political figures. So in Kenya, you will hear about Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, you will hear about Nelson Mandela. So we decided to try and look for other people who were also part of the struggle.
On August 1st, flights to Kenya were finally resumed, and 2 days later I traveled back to Nairobi. We continued writing, and we also spoke to several people in Kenya. We met with Sarina Patel and Sahid, who told us a lot about Makan Singh and the important role of the Indian community for the fight for independence in Kenya.
We went all the way from Nairobi to Nyeri, and we met this group of old men who were young during colonial times, and they would tell us, and we are asking them questions about things like the kipande. Who carried the kipande? How did the emergency period happen? How are women and men treated differently? And it was also interesting that they also taught us some of the songs that were actually sung during the Mau Mau.
Before I traveled back to Germany, we recorded the stories which had already been written. And then for me, the focus shifted very much from doing research, from writing to creating the music to the piece. When I returned to Nairobi, we started to rehearse with music. Rehearsal rooms were still closed due to the pandemic, so we rehearsed at a private apartment.
But then something changed somewhere in the middle. As we were having one of our rehearsals, another creative came in and sat in to listen, an adult. And we did one story, I think it was a Kenyan chapter, and she was just there, glued and saying, "Oh, I didn't know that. Are you really sure about this and this?" And then she said that as for her, even as an adult, she learned a lot of things, and then that she was able to start thinking about so many things that she thought she knew that she didn't know. And we thought, maybe we should not just limit ourselves to children. Let's have a show for adults as well.
We performed individual chapters at the Buru Library and at Churchill Bookstore.
The feedback we got from these two performances even fueled our desire to have the show for adults as well, because, for example, we had at Cheche, we had one young woman coming in saying, well, of course I learned about the Mau Mau in school, but I never pictured the Dan Timothy as a person, you know, like someone with a family and who has children, who like basically away from the textbook.
And at a certain point, we organized a performance at a private apartment. We invited about 15 people to perform a 60 minutes version of the piece. And I was so happy after this performance because I realized that it worked. The performance was attended by adults but also by children, and I could sense that both adults and children could relate and they could take it in, and that was for me, that was like a breakthrough, and I really realized, yeah, we're on the right path. It really works.
Initially, we had planned to have a premiere of the event in Hamburg in March or April, but of course, the pandemic happened and we had to postpone the premiere. So after we did the shows in Nairobi, we also had another invitation in July of 2021 in Munich. And honestly, from my side, I wasn't very sure it was going to work out because these whole COVID restrictions and about the visas. So I was pleasantly surprised when we were actually able to do that. And when we went to Munich, we were able to have 6 different performances, both for children.
Mein Name ist WANGARI. Aber weil ich nicht so gut Deutsch spreche wie ihr, hilft uns Isabel, unsere Geschichten ins Deutsch zu übersetzen. Das ist okay?
And for adults and for families who came with their children.
Johannesburg, South Africa, 1932.
And what I loved even more is that on all the shows, at least some people stayed back for the question and answer to ask questions. And children would ask questions like, you guys spoke about racism. Why does racism still happen? And they would ask, oh, so is it really, really true?
We could sense that the children were able to take in the performance despite the complexity of the subject matter.
Und einen toten Kopf von einer Person mit schwarzer Hautfarbe. Dann nahm er die Schädeldecke ab und vermaß die Größe beider Gehirne.
Vor ihm liegt die abgehackte Hand und der abgehackte Fuß seiner 5 Jahre alten Tochter, die von Aufsehern ermordet wurde.
Because we had been quite concerned about the children's ability to digest the brutality of colonial structures. But the children could take it in. They asked so many questions and they wanted to know more and more about it. And this for me was the most amazing thing about the Munich performances, to realize that actually the performance had an impact on the children's mind, because that's exactly what we were hoping for from the beginning.
People are saying, you should keep doing this. This conversation is important. It is very relevant now, and you should keep doing it. So it felt very rewarding that the work we had put into bringing in the piece was actually being appreciated.
Okay, here we are, rolling.
And when Kinjeketile Ngwale came back, after a whole day and a whole night.
Before Wangari went back to Nairobi, we recorded all the stories in Hamburg, because the idea is to release also an audiobook or a podcast apart from the performances. In August, we returned to Cheche bookstore in Nairobi to present the full performance for the first ever time in Kenya.
And she hoped that she could get there and hoped that they would welcome her to live with them.
And people stayed after the performance. I mean, it's a almost 2 hours long performance, and people stayed for another 1.5 hours to ask questions and to speak about their experiences and to speak about their perspective and their opinion. And so we had another 1.5 hours of discussion and exchange.
We all listened to her and we felt something. Yeah, so I don't know what you were doing in terms of sustainability just to ensure that this doesn't die.
We have invitations for 2022 in Hamburg and hopefully also in Cologne and in Berlin.
It is called Antwerpense.
One of the chapters you're touching on is Congo. And of course, Congo leans heavily on Belgium. And somebody asked, so are you guys planning to perform this piece in Antwerp? Because we feature Antwerp in the performance. And I think it will be interesting to tour not just Germany, but also other countries. The UK, Belgium, of course. And also something I would definitely love is to do this piece also here in Kenya to more people, and if possible also to do it in more African countries, because I think this conversation is not just for Europe, it is for Africa as well, it is for all of us. So definitely there are a lot of possibilities. We're open to them.
tala putulu ya papa na ngai ezozika na 6 heures na ntongo moi ezobima engengisi bato nyonso. Tala matrice ya mama na ngai ndenge bakati yango mike na machete apres koviole ye epo ya mokonzi ya bademo wana oyo basala bitumba na midi ntango moi ezongala lokola zenith. Tala reste ya pauvre leki nanga mobali oyo bapati